in the transcript to the actual paper in question. Now, once again, sourcing to the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. This is an article called Correlation Between Non-Polio Acute Flaccid Paralysis Rates with Pulse Polio Frequency in India. And it sources to, or the authors of this study, Rachana Dhimon, Sandeep Prakash, V. Srinavis, and Jacob Pulyel. And it shows their affiliations. So these are the Indian doctors, presumably, that RFK was referring to. I don't know what RFK was referring to, but I know this is what I was referring to because I specifically linked it. And that was specifically the claim that was being made. So let's read from the abstract of this study, shall we? The last case of polio from India was reported in 2011. That year, the non-polio acute flaccid paralysis rate in India was 13.35 out of 100,000, where the expected rate is 1 or 2 out of 100,000. A previous study of data from 2000 to 2010 has detailed the NPAFP, non-polio acute flaccid paralysis rate, in a state correlated with the pulse polio rounds conducted there, and the strongest correlation with the NPAFP rate was found when the number of doses from the previous 4 years were used. However, a simple association being found with regression analysis does not prove a causal relationship. After publication of those findings, as the threat of polio had lessened, the number of rounds of OPV, oral polio vaccine, administration was brought down. The present study has been done to look at data till the end of 2017 to see if the incidence of NPAFP, this type of paralysis, declined with this reduction in polio immunization rounds. We used polio surveillance data acquired by the government of India from 2000 to 2017. Correlation of the NPAFP rate to the number of polio rounds in the state was examined, and the cumulative effect of polio cases administered in previous years was sought. NPAFP rate correlated with the OPV pulse polio rounds in that year. R equals 0.46, P is less than 0.01. 0.001, and the NPAFP rate started to decrease from 2012 when the number of pulse polio rounds had decreased. NPAFP rates in the states of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar were the highest in the country. Looking at the high NPAFP states of UP and Bihar, we found that the correlation coefficient was strongest when doses used over 5 years was considered. The response to the reduction in OPV rounds, de-challenging, adds credence to the assumption that OPV was responsible for the change in the NPAFP rate. And it says, now that India has been polio-free for over 6 years, we propose that we may be able to reduce NPAFP by further reducing pulse polio rounds. Do you understand what they are saying here? They're saying there is a correlation, a demonstrable, statistically significant correlation between the number of oral polio vaccine rounds that were being administered and the rate of this non-polio acute flaccid paralysis that was occurring in India at an order of magnitude higher than usual rates, exactly in line with the administration of this OPV, oral polio vaccine. Now, here's the thing. So they said, well, the correlation doesn't prove causation. It may have been some other factor. So we looked at the time that the OPV rounds started reducing, de-challenging, did that correspond to a decline in the NPAFP rate, the paralysis rate? And lo and behold, yes, it did. So that adds credence. As they say, it adds credence to the assumption that OPV was responsible for the change in the NPAFP rate, which is a flowery way of saying was responsible for paralyzing a number of Indians. So what is that number? Do they have a number in this scientific study? Yes, they do. And what is that number? Well, skipping down a couple of pages, we calculated the number of paralyzed children each year which exceeded the expected numbers, assuming an NPAFP rate of 2 in 100,000, which, by the way, keep in mind, is the higher figure in that assumption rate. It could be 1 in 100,000. They went with 2. And the results are displayed in Table 2. A total of 640,000 children developed NPAFP in the years 2000 to 2017, suggesting that there were an additional 491,000 paralyzed children above our expected numbers for children with NPAFP. There it is, in black and white, in this study, which once again was published in the journal of the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health, led by a team of Indian doctors. This is where the claim comes from. This is specifically what is being claimed. Now, by all means, people can take a look at this study, and I'm sure that people will, if their attention is drawn to it, they will start to attack this study. Oh, that's not a reputable journal, or they didn't do this correctly, or they didn't prove causation, or blah-de-blah-de-blah. There's a million ways to attack any piece of information you don't like. But isn't it interesting that they are not actually looking at the actual study that I provided the link to in my documentary? No, they're going to take a fact check of an Instagram post by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and then spend a lot of time just talking about RFK as an anti-vaxxer, and that's why you can dismiss this. They think you are a child, and they are trying to lie to your face, knowing that most people won't even bother to look into this. So this is specifically what I was talking about, and just as an extra added bonus, I also, if you click over 490,000 people in India, you will see there's a link also to The Hindu, which also specifically reported that number at that time, coming from this particular study. The Hindu is a very MSM mainstream Indian outlet. So again, just further, this is not coming from an Instagram post from RFK Jr. This is coming from an actual scientific study. But you wouldn't get that from looking at the fact check. And which, by the way, remember, doesn't come from the Logical Indian itself. They are sourcing their own fact check to PolitiFact. Keep that in mind. We'll come back to that later on. Okay, so that's the